om nätverk och samarbete mellan olika konstorganisationer i Barentsregionen. And I think you introduce yourself.
Yes.
So, Cornelius.
Cornelius Stiefenhofer is my name. I'm from March, the new consul chef at Havre Magazine. So, first of all, I would like to thank all of you for making it all the way to Boden, some of you even to Kiruna. Great to have you here. I hope we will have 3 or 4 exciting days together and that you take a lot of insight and experiences from Boden and Luleå. And also, of course, thanks to the guests of the panel for sharing their time and coming all the way, which is a bit difficult here in the north to travel. There's no direct connections anymore. But yeah, maybe you take the chance to say a few words about yourselves as well.
Okay, hello. My name is Riitta Kuusikko, and I'm working in Rovaniemi Art Museum in Finland. Maybe some of you have been in Rovaniemi, I don't know. Yes. Yes, Rovaniemi is in the middle of Barents region, and it's middle of everything. And we have a very nice museum in Rovaniemi. We are focusing on contemporary art, and our collection is one of the finest and biggest art, contemporary Finnish art collections. So that's about me and our museum.
Hello, my name is Svein Ingvold Pedersen. I'm director of the North Norwegian Art Center based in Lofoten. Have any of you been to Lofoten? Okay. Yes, quite a lot. The Art Center also organizes a biennial in Lofoten called Lofoten International Art Festival, and we are a regional art center working over the whole region of northern Norway. And I'm also glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Hello, I'm Hanna Horsberg Hansen, and I'm associate professor at the Art Academy in Tromsø at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Have any of you been to Tromsø? Yeah.
I think I'm leading.
I'm also a scholar in contemporary Sami art.
Hello, my name is Kristoffer Dolmen, and this summer I'm the new director in the Sami Center for Contemporary Art. It's located in Karasjok, but before I was working in Bodø in the Northern County Council for the program we have for contemporary art. So I'm new in Finnmark. I've only been in Karasjok. It's a small village, but yeah, we have a lot of visitors actually.
But yeah, we were thinking of going directly into the discussion, and I think I would like to ask you, Svein, how your experience has been to work in the region, as your institution where you work now, the Norsk Costa Center, has this regional uppdrag, task to work, and you're also representing the artists from the whole region, but also from your previous experiences working at Tromsø Kunstforening.
Yeah, I mean, do you hear me? Yeah. Well, it's a question that I could talk for a long time about, but I think that it could be interesting to see, I mean, what sort of makes the condition for collaboration in the northern part of the world. And I think that there are several of the conditions that
Kan vi hålla micken lite närmare?
Tack. Sån. Ja. Okay. I think that there are several conditions for the collaboration between institutions in the northern part of Norway that are really hard to copy. It's a vast geographical region. It's very scarcely populated. And it also means that there are few organizations in the field of art. The positive product of that is, of course, that I think that during my 10 years as a director in Tromsø and at the Art Center in Lofoten, I've probably at some point collaborated with all other art organizations in the region. So you get a kind of a familiarity. And it's also something about this region that we call Northern Norway. It's not a political level. It encompasses 3 different counties, but it's always been thought about as a separate region in Norway, which also means that there are several institutions that has got the responsibility to work all over the region. So you have to, it's not possible to sit there as a director, as an organization, and only think about your own program in your own house. You always have to look outwards and to orientate yourself about what is happening in that region. Thinking a little about the tradition for collaboration across borders in the northern region. I think that it's something about the structure in Finland, in Norway and Sweden, where we all have the capitals in the south. We all share some kind of feeling of being at a long distance from the power centers. And I mean, no, you have all come all the way up to Boden and Luleå, but thinking about in the 70s, even up to the 1980s, that distance was, I mean, it was felt as a longer distance. It was very expensive to travel. It was very expensive to coordinate anything happening from the south to the north. So I think that, I mean, we have this like a common feeling towards the capitals and the centers. And also, I can say a little about the art center where I work. It is also funded as a kind of a regional collaboration from the start, because it's one of 15 art centers in Norway that were all established by the artists' associations in the 70s and the 80s. So the foundation for the institution is a collaboration between artists and the institution showing the art. So we have always been working very close to the artist community, and also think that even though we are also running an international biennial, we are sort of using this closeness to the artistic community in the region, and we are taking that with us when we are working on an international level as well.
For example, the Lofoten Art Biennial.
For example, the Lofoten International Art Festival. Yes. Is that the answer?
I think, yeah, that's a nice introduction to the region from an institutional perspective. And you mentioned the 3 North Norwegian regions, Nordland, Troms, and Finnmark, to name them. And one thing that is also special about this particular defined region that has no political structure as such, is that it is also the focus area of the Norwegian-Russian Barents collaboration, which I think shapes the Norwegian as well as the North Norwegian as well as the Northwest Russian art life quite a bit. So there is a strong encouragement for many years already to encourage institutional as well as artistic collaboration, or collaboration between artists between Russia and Norway. And that's actually how Christopher Dolmen and me started to, or met, and then later started to collaborate. That was when you were back in Nordlands Fylke. So maybe you could say a few things about how this collaboration, or this focus on the Russian-Norwegian collaboration has shaped institutions.
Well, it goes back quite some, I mean, 30 years ago, actually, it's part of the perestroika process. But anyway, the historical reasons is there. And if you look at the map, Northern Norway and Russia always had contact, and early on from 1987, I mean, both Nordland and Finnmark took the initiative before, actually, in Oslo to have a cooperation with, between the regions in northwest of Russia. So it was not culture only, but education, and also, big hopes for, of course, business development and so on. So, for example, in education, I mean, most students from abroad in the north of Norway is from Russia, and also other post-Soviet countries. So in culture, I mean, it's part of a peace process or like a friendship process between Norway and Russia, and culture was a big part of it. So for us, it's normal to see a ballet performance from Russia, or I mean, Philharmonic Orchestra from St. Petersburg. It became something normal in the beginnings of the 90s. But I mean, in 1993, they started this institution in Kirkenes called Barents Sekretariat. That is, of course, that the Norwegian state put money into this. So it's a founding body that actually all cultural institutions can apply. And that, of course, helps. And that started really early on. And now there is one, we can say, special program only professional cultural cooperation, and every year it's had like 11 million Norwegian krone. But altogether in Barents Sekretariat for Cooperation, you have 30 million a year. So that explains why there's so many initiatives between Norway and Russia, also in culture, but also in other spheres. So, I mean, it's basically to say that there is an institution that have money. Yeah. It explains a lot.
Thank you. But I mean, when we look at how these collaborations had a big impact on how the cultural life manifests, I think it's also very, very interesting to look a bit further back, before this sort of crucial moment of Soviet Union breaking up. We talked earlier today, Hanna, and it was very, very interesting to hear what the Nordic funding institutions helped to establish here in the High North. Maybe you could say a few things about it.
Yes, I have looked into how the Sami artists have made their institution building since the 1970s, and when you see it from the south and when you see it from the centers, it sounds like that's something very peripheral, very small, very far away, very local. But in fact, it was not. It was very international, and it was when the Sami artists in the 1970s builded the first organizations, and that was first for the writers, and then for the visual art field. They always had cooperation between the Sami artists in Norway, in Sweden, in Finland, and that was kind of what they were aiming at. It was kind of a political aim to make these pan-Sami organizations. It was not connected to the nation states, but it was connected to the Nordic level. And when they wanted to get recognition for their organization, they didn't go to the capitals. They didn't go to Oslo, to Copenhagen, to Helsinki. They went to Copenhagen, to the Nordic Council, to get both fundings and to be accepted as a national organization, aligned with the Norwegian Artists Organization, the Swedish Artists Organization, and the Finnish Artists Organization. And they got that recognition. After one year after they had visited the Nordic Council in Copenhagen, they were accepted, just online with other national art organizations. And that was a very important, and it's also important to remember how international this really was. And also immediately they were connecting further out in the world. They went to Greenland to get connections, they went to Alaska, to Canada, to South America, to Australia, and everywhere they were also taking part in other artists, indigenous artists, organization building. So, and I think also Christopher experienced when he came to Karasjok and took up the position as director of the Sami Center of Contemporary Art, that it's immediately this international, this networking, this border crossings, it just happened. And it had to happen. Otherwise, it doesn't. it couldn't work without, because it's not a local, it's not a peripheral problem. It's an international thing, and I think that's from the perspective from the south and from the capitals. This is often a blind spot to see how international and how networking the artists in the north and the Sami artists have been working since the 1970s.
Thank you. But out of that, first initiatives with the Sami Artists Union, the Sami Center for Contemporary Art was established. And now you just started, but from what I understood, we met a few weeks ago in Rovaniemi for a meeting. You were mentioning the plans for the next years, and you will continue with this collaboration that is very much in this circular perspective, right?
Well, I have to say, 1979 they started this art organization. It didn't come with an art institution. Of course, they had to work to get an art institution, and the first was established in 1986, and it was not big, it was small, but the change, so now the center is not run by the Artist Union, it's a foundation, and from 2014 it had, you can say, like an exhibition of Kunsthall. So it's much, you can say, bigger than the earlier gallery spaces, so it's a good platform now to start work, of course. And if you look to the archive of this institution, as Hanna says, in the 70s it was a lot of indigenous people rights all over the world, and they met in culture days, they had a forum and so on. So early on it was natural to cooperate with someone from Latin America or Alaska or Greenland. They felt they had a connection, and they started just to work together. So it's been there for 40 years.
And now we met, exactly as I mentioned, all of us in Rovaniemi for the Northern Art Network meeting, and Julie Decker is also part in that with Anchorage Museum. So that was a very, very interesting experience. Maybe, and you just opened an exhibition in collaboration with Anchorage Museum. So maybe that would be interesting to see how the Finnish perspective on this collaboration is.
Yes. This is what you said, this Northern Art Network. It's quite a new network. The first meeting was in Rovaniemi. It was 4 years ago. And now we have met art museums and art institutions. We have met 4 years, and we have annual meetings. First was in Rovaniemi, and then in Anchorage in Alaska, and then in Arkhangelsk in Russia. Last year we had the meeting in Norway, and this year again in Rovaniemi. And we had the meeting, this network is Northern Art Network called, but it's all the Arctic areas. So we had visitors or participants from northern Finland, Sweden, Norway, Canada, Greenland and Alaska, and video greeting from Russia. And we opened at the meeting the exhibition called The Place of Origin, and it is the first big step on that network. What we have done, it's an exhibition, very nice exhibition from Anchorage Museum collection. It's contemporary indigenous art from Alaska, and it's now in Rovaniemi in our museum. But we have a big experience of international cooperation and especially in Barents region. And we have in our Barents region, we have, of course, here in Nordic countries, we have a Sami artist, but we have also in this Barents region, we have also other indigenous nations like Komi, Nenets, or Veps. And it is also very important to show art of these indigenous people. And I think as we are, how to say, institutions running by public money, it's our duty to show art from our area. But I think, for example, for our museum, our area is the whole Arctic, not only Finland, Sweden, and this Barents region, but whole Arctic, because we are living in the north. And how to say, IKEA is not in the center of Barents region. It is Rovaniemi. Yeah, we don't have IKEA, but what we have, I would like to make some announcement. We had this year this big meeting of museum meeting, but also Res Artis. It's worldwide residencies programs meeting. It was held in Rovaniemi this year, but next year we have a high-profile meeting or conference. It's Arctic Arts Summit. It's on June, and the program is already on internet, on website, and it's the main organization is our University of Lapland, but we are involved, of course, in making that.
Thank you. So yeah, if you have the chance, I think it's 4th of June next year that the Arctic Art Summit will be held the second time. The first time was in Harstad last year, or was it this year? Last year. But I mean, what is maybe an important element here in this conversation, what I find important is the collaboration that is happening in the closer region of Northern Scandinavia, in the Barents region, but more and more also in the circumpolar direction or dimension, to which I think in a way reflects what the local culture is about. I heard that also about Sweden, but I think it's much more the case here in the High North, where the cultural value of helping each other and working together instead of against each other is a high value, and I think that is something that reflects also a lot in this institutional collaboration in these sparsely populated areas. And yeah, as we say, sparsely populated areas, it's also very, very hard to sort of define or identify big centers. I mean, Svolvær with Nordnorsk Kunst Center and Lofoten Biennial, it's like, what, 8,000 or 10,000 inhabitants at best?
In the municipality, we are 9,000.
9,000. So, but I think, and I hope that that's okay to say in front of Rovaniemi, but what I think, what has really developed into a center for contemporary art life in the whole region is, in my perspective, Tromsø, with the Art Academy being established around about 10 years ago. I think our anniversary was last year. So maybe, I think that could be very interesting, what sort of the initial thoughts behind having an art academy in the High North were, because in Norway, as you may know, there is Trondheim, Oslo, and Bergen, very important art schools, and then 10 years ago, finally, the North got its own art academy. So maybe that would be an interesting sort of insight to share, and how this sort of then affected also this network dynamics, I think, very strongly.
One proof of the network, Cornelius is a former student at the Art Academy in Tromsø. They graduated, I think, yeah, as a master student.
Last year.
Last year, yes. The idea of an art academy in Tromsø is also very old, and as a dinosaur I almost remember it, because that was also in the 70s, because there was a very strong will to be kind of self-sufficient and to show that we can do everything in the north that they do in the south, but we do it differently, and we do it smarter, and we do it better. And there was also the idea that Northern Norway, they needed to educate their own artists as they established a university to provide the region with doctors educated in the north, with teachers educated in the north. That had taken place for a very long time. But then also the idea, why not educate artists also? But it took 30 years, 35 years from the first ideas and all the planning until 2007, where then Art Academy and a bachelor study plan was established. And I think no one could really foresee what really happened, because we have people apply from all over the world. A few years ago, I think when you still were a student, we had in fact students from Asia, from Oceania, from Africa, from South America, and from North America, and maybe one from Europe. I don't remember. That was probably you. So it's really attracting people from all over the world to come to Tromsø and become an artist in Tromsø. And the effect is, of course, also that what do artists do? They establish artist-run spaces, which also became attractive for other artists to come to exhibit. And that again, of course, influenced our institution, that we are continuously what is really happening, what's the pulse or the seismograph of the art, the international art scene. It happens also in our art academy, in a way, in our town, and it's not a disadvantage to be far away or far up or wherever. It's just a benefit, because it's not because it's exotic, but it's also because it's open and you are allowed to do things. I just have one example, also how the city itself have accepted the strange art students, because a lot of things they do are very strange, and they have always tried to kind of search for the borders. What can they accept, and when do they say that we don't accept it? And there was some students some years ago that asked to do a performance in the city hall, and the mayor had said, yes, of course, welcome. Why we like to have performance in the city hall. And what they were doing, they were mooning out of the window. And if you know the building, it's just glass, and there were a lot of moonings, and people were applauding. How this was really funny. But the students had expected that there would come kind of reaction that this is not acceptable. You can't be mooning from the city hall, but you could, and they did. So, and I think maybe after that it's not very interesting anymore to search for where are the borders, how far can we go, when have we gone too far in a way. And we are also part of a network. It's called the U-Arctic, which is a network among art educations in the north. And it's the University of Lapland, as you mentioned, and it's Sami Allaskogla, the Sami University College in Kautokeino. It's us, it's Umeå. I don't remember if there's anyone else. But we also have a network, both professionally and exchange of students, and yeah. These networks, they just occur. We need them all the time, and we make them, and we collaborate. Yeah.
Yeah, Christopher?
I was to follow up on Tromsø's role, because we hear now there was a lot of development in the contemporary art scene in Tromsø, and also as a meeting point, because I think it was in 2012 Troms County Council took the initiative for a meeting for artists in residence place, I mean from Russia, Sweden, Finland and Norway, I mean the northern regions. And tomorrow one of the topic is cooperation with Russia, and I mean what they did there, they just started to gathering the people, but not any project ideas or anything. It was the meeting point that people should get to know each other before you start any project, and that was actually a very good thing, because then it can use more time to get, and there was actually I think 2 or 3 annual meetings that established a network, and then more projects started to happen. So Tromsø was the meeting point for many people from and when we talk about Russia, this is Murmansk and region, and Arkhangelsk and Karelia and Leningrad or St. Petersburg, so it's not whole Russia. I mean, it's concentrated to the northwest of Russia, so it's actually possible to travel also, not so far. And actually, it started a 3-year program with that program was mostly between the Norwegian and Russians, but it was artists, it was curators, it was writers, and it was a lot of traveling, meetings, workshops, and the last year exhibition, video screenings, and so on. So, but I think the best thing that was actually people met before they had any ideas what a project should be about.
An interesting element there was that many of the Russian participants from the different regions had to go all the way to Norway to meet for the first time, and then again and again, because Russia then again is an extremely centralized country, so most of these representatives from the regions, they would go individually to meet their partners in Moscow, but then never really have the chance to meet each other. So yeah, so we were then working together, but also individually. I was working a lot on trying to create these clusters within the region then of Northwest Russia. But okay,
I mean, this is more like a comment on the on this Barents region cultural policies and what is called the Barents Code, which is the cultural code. And I think it's an interesting case, really, thinking about how networks come about, because this is for sure a completely political idea. And I mean, there is no doubt that the reason behind this funding is official Norwegian state policies. It's a cultural program that's really started off, I mean, for bettering the relations to Russia, and also for other possibilities in business and so on.
And oil exploration.
Sure, I mean, all those things that we sometimes also are very explicit that we do not like. But I still, so that is of course the background, and all of us, and I think most of us has from some time or another benefited from that funding. So that is one side of it, but of course the other side of it is, for instance, that I mean in Tromsø you will have like 50% of the younger artists there. They have been to Russia. They know Russian artists. They know Russian institutions. So you also have created a completely other knowledge and completely other field of experiences within the art scene in the region. But still, I think from time to time that I'm just, I mean, playing along the guidelines of a manuscript written by the Norwegian state. I mean, it's got these two sides. And I think that is interesting with all those kind of funding program initiated from the above and set up to make relations, really,
yes,
and to make networks.
That's exactly money from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is fueling the Barents collaboration. But Jasper, how are we with time? We are like...
Yeah, you're in good time.
In good time?
Yeah.
So,
you're doing fine.
We're fine. Before we open for questions from the panel, I would like to add to this particular experience of artists from Norway and Russia working or meeting each other on a more regular basis. That I think that opened really also sort of like for a new perspective on subversion and working sort of against or dealing with real problems, especially the last 3-4 years when in Russia the contemporary art scene has been heavily marginalized, like everything that became more official or possible to aim at from a government perspective, then that was sort of taken out. So it became a very, very low profile but highly dynamic and highly interesting art scene, and I think I think that nurtured these two artists when meeting so frequently. So I think that was a very, very interesting experience, and I think that's something that is going on, even with a bit of an unclear future right now about how this regional collaboration will continue, because it was always like before even with the Ukraine crisis, with the Crimea crisis, there was like this very, very strong standpoint from the Norwegian government, or especially in the High North, like the relations between Moscow and Oslo do not necessarily represent these particular regional relations that have been established over 25 years. But that has seen some very sudden and unexpected changes then in the last 2-3 years, with accusations of spies and some quite aggressive challenging from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So they became over the years more and more paranoid about infiltration from through Norwegian artists in the Northwest. And just last week there was a bomb attack in Arkhangelsk, for example, which was not really covered much in the West, but the FSB, the secret police building, was attacked by a 19-year-old student with a bomb. So there is tension also now in the region. And 3 years ago, a leader of this Pomor collaboration, Pomorians, like this ancient ties between Norway and Russia, he has been arrested by the FSB and accused of collaborating with the enemy, or separatism, which is like the worst crime in Russia. So yeah, it is an interesting now sort of like time for this regional collaboration that has been praised, that has been exported to other European cross-border collaborations, like in the Bulgarian, Ukrainian, Romanian cross-border area. Lessons learned from the Barents collaboration have been applied. There have been workshops and so forth. So and now it is at a point where it's almost about to break, and funding from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was halted after a visit of Erna Solberg to Donald Trump. So it's remaining to be a very exciting place to look at the moment. Yeah. So that's just something out of what is actually now happening in this particular collaboration. But I think we are more or less with 35 minutes, 40 minutes where we were. So if there is any questions from you.
Yeah, please take a couple of minutes around the tables to reflect on what you've heard and see if there are any, are you curious on any specific thing or any questions that you would like to raise? But take a couple of minutes to talk to each other first.
I'm very inexperienced. But you can still maybe when the question
Do you have any questions? There will be room for 1 or 2 questions. So please raise your hand and you'll get the mic. Or if you just have a reflection or a thought that you would share. It's always hard going from the small group to the large group. So I can start with one question because I listened to the last thing you said. You talked about the change in sort of attitudes and corporations. So if you would were to sort of, what you see is the next step there? It could be to any of you. What is the next step to address those things? Do you have sort of collaborations or projects in the pipeline, so to say, to do something with that, or is it? How do you navigate those challenges?
So, answering for Havre Magasinet, or first maybe a more general observation that I sort of experienced with this changing role of the Arctic geopolitically when it comes to climate change, how much more visible it is than here. With these geopolitical tensions when it comes to interests in the Arctic, but also with the boom in tourism industry, it is sort of like not out of the blue that there is now more tension again between Norway and Russia, for example, or between the West and Russia, particularly when it comes to the high north. But what I experienced sort of more and more was sort of like a stronger alliance forming in a circumpolar perspective. So even if the Russian institutions cannot participate in the same way in this circumpolar collaboration as of now, in the conversation today it was mentioned that it is impossible, for example, to loan art objects from Russian collections to US American exhibitions because of sanctions. So there is like a lot of sort of like new barriers in that sense, but it also brought, I think, a bit closer together Northern Europe, North America, and the North Atlantic islands. So, but on the other side, there is several institutions in the region with a long experience and long-term partnerships with Russian art institutions. And to speak for Havre Magasinet, we try everything we can to maintain these relations with Russian art institutions and Russian artists, because I personally think that it's exactly these relations or cultural, it's also cultural diplomacy, but to maintain these relations between us and our, Sweden is not a direct neighbor, but it's like maybe 2,000 or 10,000 people living between Luleå and or Haparanda and the Russian border. So it's just a bit of wood, trees in between, and then we're in Russia. So in that sense, it's not the other end of the world. So to maintain these relations and to maintain contact and exchange thoughts and exchange critical questions around tolerance and peacekeeping and equal rights is something that we feel very important. So we will definitely try to continue with that, and will.
Thank you.
Because you were asking about, how the political situation makes it more difficult to collaborate.
Yes, and how you try to sort of navigate with that.
Yeah. I would say, from my experience, it's always some openings when you, maybe it's difficult for larger institutions to work together, but on like an artist-to-artist level or inviting artists and so on, it's always a possibility. because I mean Russia is not like that. They never close it down. Like I mean, you can get the impression from reading in some large national newspaper. So it's always possibilities for working together on this more like ground level, so to say, and I think that becomes more and more important in the actual situation.
Thank you. Yeah, you want to add? Yes, please.
I can say also on behalf of Finland, we have a long relationship with Russia. We have 1,000 kilometer border between Russia and working. Have been always neighbors, and good neighbors or bad neighbors, but always neighbors. And but when you have a cooperation, it's always between human beings, and it's always about goodwill. If you have goodwill, everything is possible. And if you have good relationships, or you are in the same level mentally, or how to say, and willing to cooperate, it's always. And I think it's very important to make cooperation with everybody, and also with Russia. And it's important, but it's interesting also, and nice and worth to make hard work with them to have cooperation. Yes.
Thank you. And that will be the. Oh, you want to add? Okay. One more thing. Thank you.
I have to add because I mean, if you talk about Sápmi, of course, it will not stop. I mean, we talked here in the institution that when the women that are not able to meet each other, they met in the 80s when it was open up. They didn't have to say anything. They just started to sing, and they understood each other. So, of course, inside of Sámi communities, this will go on, of course, in all the folk cultures.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think I'll bring with this your last words with if there is goodwill, there is always possibilities. I think that's sort of a nice way forward. And thank you very much. You will be staying during the day, so there is possibilities to keep up the discussions with you. And okay, thank you.